This week I'm talking about the term mindfuckery. I want to help you process what's happening and know that you're not alone. And I do appreciate that for some of you it's going to be really hard to come to terms with the fact that these games, this manipulation was done on purpose, because I've also been in that space. Welcome to the Mindfuckery podcast, which is FeedSpot's fifth must-listen-to podcast on emotional abuse. I'm your host, Elizabeth, and in here we explore areas others are fear to tread. Through my own personal journey, I know how much this hurts and how confusing life becomes. So many questions, no closure, and no real answers. I've been a woundologist for over 20 years. I'm the unintentional author of Finding Lily, the A to Z of emotional abuse and divorce matters. I help you clear past life wounds, ancestral trauma, and this life wounding. And as the founder of the Inner Healing Sanctuary, I've created Wound Talking, the original Wound, and Quantum Glow. I'm on a mission to help educate as many people as I can on the effects of trauma on our lives and our children's lives, and healing the wounds of our mothers and our fathers. It stops here, it stops now, it stops with us. So welcome along for the journey of a lifetime. And as always, you are very, very welcome. And I have to admit, I've really struggled with saying you're very welcome, because I really wish I didn't have to do this. I really wish this wasn't a thing. And coercive control and mindfuckery, all these games and manipulation that are played, wasn't real. I wish it didn't exist, which I'm sure you do as well. I first came across the term mindfuckery on YouTube. I stumbled at the very, very beginning of my journey across a YouTube channel. And this woman, sadly not posting anymore, but she was processing her relationship and what had happened to her on YouTube. And she just said one day, it's mindfuckery. And I was like, wow. I mean, she's experiencing this pain. Her ex has abandoned her. I can't, honestly, it's so long ago now, I can't actually remember what happened, but things would happen in her life. She would take to YouTube, explain it. And then she got to the point where she didn't need to do that. It had helped her process what was going on. But hearing her say this stopped me in my tracks, and it resonated on such a deep level within me. But it sadly didn't break the chain that was trapping me, that trauma, the needing him, being addicted to what it was that our relationship was. I naively at the time thought that I could hold my ex accountable, that I could get closure and he'd give me that, and he'd realise what he'd done and how much he'd hurt me. And I say I naively because the words that I heard didn't give me any closure and left me feeling empty and numb, because I realised that they were empty. Mindfuckery is the collision of cognitive dissonance and gaslighting. And from that name, I'm sure that you can understand this isn't something pleasant to experience. The definition via Vulgar Slang is the term used to describe mental confusion inflicted deliberately by another person. The action of someone acting in a way or doing an action that with intent of seriously disturbing another person. It's the mental confusion that happens in such a covert way that it distorts your reality, making you question your own sanity and your memory. When the words don't match the action, you might be saying, but he says he loves me. Why would he do that? Something I said multiple times a day to start with. It's crazy making. So your intuition told you that something was wrong, or you didn't believe the story that they were telling you. They lied to you and you ended up questioning yourself whilst they minimized your feelings. Long-term contact with a toxic or emotionally abusive person causes damage to the brain. And there's so much happening in your brain. It shuts down. The hippocampus goes into hibernation. Your mind and your body sense danger and they realize that they're being attacked and they shut down to protect you. You're then left in a state of confusion. Cognitive dissonance occurs when we experience a state of holding two or more contradictory thoughts or beliefs at the same time. That's why words are cheap. Your intuition might have made you feel that something was wrong or that you didn't believe this story that they're telling you. Maybe they've blame shifted and you've questioned yourself, believing it was all your fault. Or they might have tried to confuse you by saying, but I told you this the other day. And then you're recalling the conversation, wondering wondering, is there something wrong with your memory? Because you really don't remember them saying that. This form of abuse penetrates on so many different levels. Your brain was being tricked to believe what you were told was the truth, and it takes time to de-traumatize from this. And this mindfuckery can go on long after the relationship is over. You were trained to override your gut, which was telling you when you felt something was off. They might have blame shifted, telling you that you have trust issues, and this is why you're questioning them. You're questioning their behaviour, and that stops you in your tracks. You start to wonder if this is really true. Is this where the feeling is coming from? Do I have trust issues? Is this my fault? And if that works, they will regurgitate. They will use this term over and over and over again, as well as trying to hide their behaviour a bit better from you so that you don't pick up on it again. You don't understand or realise what's really happening. And for people healing from a toxic relationship, this can cause emotional confusion and anxiety. Cognitive dissonance is the reason people say that they feel like they're going crazy, but it's a very specific kind of crazy. And eventually you might have started to wonder what was happening and believe that you couldn't even trust your own judgment. And your mind has been trained, and this is how our minds work. They go off seeking evidence. So each time an emotion comes up, you'll go off seeking all of the times you got it wrong, believing their version of events. So when we experience any form of anxiety or go through a prolonged period of stress, our brains go into survival mode. We can't deal with any big decisions and we can barely look after ourselves. When bonds are formed, they're usually for protection. But in this type of relationship, due to the trauma, you turn to the person who's abusing you for protection. I was talking to somebody recently, I'm going to call him Ollie. He was in a long-term relationship with his partner, and gradually over a period of time, there were changes in him. His mental health deteriorated. He was off sick from work. And when he was there, his behaviour was a bit erratic. They got married. His behaviour deteriorated even further. And eventually he couldn't cope with his wife's behaviour. His friends helped him leave that relationship. He needed counselling. He's still got emotional wounds trapped in his body. They have now divorced. But he said it was so hard. Knowing it wasn't healthy, being in the relationship, he was still defending it and her. So when anyone tried to talk to him about it, he would challenge them. And maybe that's something you've experienced. I know it was something I've experienced. Even though I knew the relationship wasn't healthy, and after the relationship had finished, I still protected it. I still protected my ex. I'd give reasons as to why he was treating me the way he was treating me. It wasn't his fault. We develop bonds for survival in childhood, and these are usually with our caregivers. They are the foundation of our attachment. So when our safety is threatened in some way, it's them that we turn to for support and protection. Trauma bonding is one of the reasons it's so hard to heal from these toxic and emotionally abusive relationships. The damage caused puts you in a state of confusion as you had no idea the abuse was taking place. Bonding happens in all relationships, but this type of bonding was one-sided. And this is why it's so easy for them to walk away, as they didn't bond with you. It's a really strong connection, and it strengthens when we spend time with someone, when we make love to them, when we have children together. And trauma bonding is used by the emotional abuser or this toxic person to enable them to gain power and control over you. And it's during the idealization stage that they position themselves as the caregiver. They shower you with attention, they gifts, meals out, manufacturing a love you may never have experienced before. They see you in a way that you have never been seen before. And they then start devaluing you, they put you down, and they might be slight at first. They might use triangulation, gaslighting, coercive techniques. You may have rationalised their behaviour, believing they cared about you, creating even more bonding. And this was the reason you were so connected to them. And when the relationship ended, you wondered how you're going to survive. And you might be there now wondering how you are going to survive, taking any morsel of attention that they give you. On average, it takes us 7 to 8 times to get out of these relationships, which means for some, it might be 2 or 3 times, another it might be 20. We go back, we forgive them. And it's the trauma bonding that made it hard to enforce boundaries. And in fact, this is one of their games. They love knocking the boundaries down. They'll find something that's important to you, and they'll push against it and push against it until they can tread all over it and you don't even recognize it as something that was really important to you. They're also getting you addicted to oxytocin and dopamine and other hormones. They started to introduce situations that release stress hormones. This was done with the slight put downs and by creating drama. And what they're doing is manufacturing these emotions. I've got another example. Carmel's married. She's been married twice. This is her second husband. In fact, they have recently divorced. She had children with him and from her first marriage. She knew the second marriage wasn't healthy and that he was controlling. She had a great social life before she met him, but that slowly diminished. Her circle was getting smaller and smaller. He was at the happiest when she was at home with him. He coerced her into believing that she needed him financially, and the impact of them not being together would ripple out further and affect her older children. Eventually, they separated. And through his words and manipulation, his younger children went on to experience separation anxiety. The youngest at 5 would get to her father's house and then she would call home and go back to her mother. The manipulation that went on, this is why words are cheap. A good actor can tell you that they love you, but it's their actions that speak louder than words. And cognitive dissonance or gaslighting or mindfuckery is a very unique experience for each of us. Only a person that has gone through this very specific form of abuse will understand what it's like and how deep that trauma runs. And Rebecca, her husband had an affair and she tried to protect the relationship and him while she decided what she wanted to do. She did ask him to leave, but he convinced her that they were better off staying together and working it out. As she worked through the betrayal, he, during this time, showered her with gifts. He took her out. They went out as a family. He spent a lot of time at home with her and the children. And that's when she noticed the focus was back on them as a family again, realizing that he'd been slipping away from her emotionally. He was monitoring her time, and it's something that she's still trying to come to terms with and still doesn't recognize, but he was monitoring her time, who she could speak to. He rarely left her alone. He isolated her from her friends and her family, convincing her that they could sort this out between themselves. He said that other people wouldn't understand what they had and they would interfere. And she started to believe him. She distanced herself. She concentrated on him and the family. She made excuses when she was asked out. She self-isolated, and he did it again. He had another affair, different woman. And at this point, Rebecca thought it was her fault. She wasn't good enough for him. And although this time he decided to leave, he actually left the family home. He didn't leave her alone. He continues to manipulate her through the children. These are real people. I have changed their names and tweaked a few details, but they are real and they are experiencing and have experienced mindfuckery. Some of it continues. Some people have broken away. But what they had in common were their wounds. Some of them had grown up with parents who had played victim, or they weren't able to save or protect the parent from the manipulation that they saw them experience. And these wounds meant that when they met an abusive partner, they recognized something in that person. And this wound, the child that couldn't save or help their parent, jumped out and thought, I can do this now. I can protect you now. And this is why, for me, it's so important that we look at the wounds. And if you've experienced this form of abuse, it's equally important to surround yourself with people who understand what you've been through. As I said, it penetrates on so many different levels. Your brain was tricked to believe what you were told was the truth, when actually it was a lie. And it's so easy to slip down and into that dark hole when you're faced with new facts and new situations, new lies pop up. Mindfuckery has you believing them, and trauma bonding keeps you trapped. You believe that you know them, that they would never treat you in that way. They'd never treat you the way they treat other people. I remember believing this. It's a form of emotional abuse involving mind games. It erodes your confidence and slowly allowing the other person to gain more power and control over you and a relationship, including, because this relationship can continue, particularly if you've got children, after divorce, after the relationship was over, you are still a form of supply. So mindfuckery is a mental confusion inflicted deliberately. Listen to that word, inflicted deliberately by another person. It's the action of someone acting in a way or doing an action with the intent of seriously disturbing the other person. It's like an addiction, but instead of a drug, you're addicted to the way they make you feel. They play with you and your emotions the same way a cat plays with a dead mouse. Then they walk away without a backward glance. When I wrote my book, Divorce Matters, I took everything that I needed to know or wished I had known. I'd been told things like, we don't need solicitors, they just want your money. I had no closure. I did sort of get it from a letter, but this was a couple of years into the divorce process at the time, but it confirmed what I'd known and been told that I was imagining. But what I did discover was a 3-year-old child that had been running my life and my divorce, and the wounds that had been picked at and left to fester, oozing this toxicity into my mind and body, they were the wounds that were reacting. It's this child that was reacting, never responding. And my reactions were painful. They were loud and demanding. And this is why it's so important to heal those wounds. But you can only actually do it if you're ready to do it. I had a conversation with a friend on Saturday, and I remember saying to her, there were times that people were telling me things and I was saying, yeah, I get it. I know. But there was something inside me that couldn't let go of that relationship, couldn't let go of how it made me feel or the importance I felt in it, because it isn't just about the abuser taking. You get something from that relationship. It is toxic, but you do get something. And that can be sometimes really hard to face. Remember to trust your intuition. Your gut is your second brain. You were told to turn it off. You were told to ignore it. You were told you couldn't trust it. But honestly, it's the one that we should be listening to. It's the feelings. It's the vibrations that we get when we're people that don't feel right, that make us pull away from someone. Those are the things that we should be listening to and feeling into. Now, if you're interested in learning more ways that you can accelerate your healing and divorce emotionally from the abuser, I've put some links below. There's a link to my self-care guide and my videos on grounding and breathing, which are so important. They keep you in your body. That's where you need to be. The brain's been tricked and anaesthetized. It's been turned off. You've been trained to believe this is all your fault and you can't trust your intuition. In your body, you don't think. In your body, you feel. Or that's what we're aiming to, is to feel again. Because I remember vividly, and on so many occasions, I was completely numb. I'd look in the mirror. I did not recognize the person staring back at me. I describe it as being a shell of my former self. And I felt nothing. There was nothing behind the eyes. There was nothing in the body. And then the pain hit and I would be on the floor crying, but there was nothing in between. There was no emotion, and this is what we now need to wake up, to get out of hibernation, to heal these deep wounds that the abuser has picked the scab to and allow them to heal. And by using some really simple techniques, grounding, breathing, creating a safe space is so important as well, because it allows your body to stand down. It is on overdrive, protecting you. You learn how to heal these wounds and you learn how to protect yourself, reset your boundaries, set stronger boundaries, dig bigger holes to put the posts in for these boundaries. It can stop protecting you and step back. I hope this week's been helpful. Mindfuckery is painful, but it's such a good word. It describes what's going on in such a perfect way. And as always, I'm sending you loads and loads of love until next time.